Hello and welcome to another FECAVA Vet Chat. Tonight, I would like to speak to Professor Zoe Polizopoulou from Thessaloniki Vet School and with Stephan Neumann, Professor of Veterinary Medicine from the University of Göttingen. And we want to talk about Feline Vector-borne diseases. This is because FECAVA has just published a full set of fact sheets on these diseases, following on to the very successful work of the same working group on canine vector-borne diseases, which was initiated by our Serbian colleague, Nenad Milojkovic. So, good evening, Zoe, and good evening, Stephan.
Good evening.
Good evening to everyone.
So tell me, the new fact sheets, how did you come up with the list of vector-borne diseases, and how did the working group work to produce these fact sheets?
So, while for dogs it was quite easy to select those conditions that are the most common in practice, especially for people traveling with their pets during summer. So, most of them are now known even in Northern Europe. This used to be different. These used to be exotic diseases, so vets living and working in Western and Northern countries did not know a lot about them. So this has changed because of traveling and because of the climate change. So while this was an easy task for dogs, cats were a bit special. So we brainstormed during our first meeting for the FECAVA fact sheets, and we tried to select this. Everyone had his or her opinion. So we thought not to overburden people with too much information, maybe with some exotic diseases that will very rarely be encountered. And after that, we concluded that it would be wise to be short and sweet and have only 2 or 3 conditions to report on. And maybe if down the road any other addition was deemed necessary, then we could add more information. So it was a joint venture.
So would you say that feline vector-borne diseases are probably underdiagnosed conditions?
Yeah, and then Stephan can comment also, but you know, because in Greece, unfortunately, we have all these stray cats, and despite the work that is being done by welfare societies, and some of those are very well organized now, so we get patients from these welfare societies, and they're usually cats in bad condition. So I would say that, again, to compare with the dogs, in a dog you might have 3 or 4 vector-borne diseases diagnosed in the same animal, if it's a high-risk animal. This is not the case in cats. So we usually have, they are certainly underdiagnosed, and because they don't have very prominent or specific signs. So they most usually get mistaken for other things. And because, again, diagnostics are not readily accessible to these populations, then it is more difficult to verify or reach with a certain certainty the diagnosis.
Yeah, I actually totally agree with that, what you said. So in northern Germany, we see less vector-borne diseases as in southern Europe, especially in cats, because when you see the clinical signs in cats, they are much more unspecific as you can see them in dogs. For example, for many of these diseases, anorexia and lethargy are typical clinical symptoms, and this can be everything. So it's not so easy to diagnose them, especially when you work in an area where they are not so common. And so I also agree that they are underdiagnosed in my opinion. But I also think that also the dogs' diseases are underdiagnosed, especially in Northern Europe, because they are not so common as you see them in Southern Europe.
If we have a closer look at the fact sheet, so there is one fact sheet on Feline Leishmaniosis, one on Haemoplasmosis in cats, and then one on Feline Heartworm Disease. I mean, Feline Leishmaniosis. I have to say that it's, as Stephan said, for me as a Northern European, it's hard enough to diagnose this in a dog, but as the symptoms in cats are very subtle sometimes, and they can even be more or less asymptomatic, I find it a real challenge. How common is this condition in Southern Europe?
So we thought the same when my colleagues in Greece, and there is a research group in the second veterinary school in Greece, which is located in central Greece. So they had quite an extensive research going on regarding feline leishmaniosis. So initially, they also thought that they would get very few information, if any, and then they found that there are cats that are positive. Most of them have vague clinical signs, and until now, these signs are entirely different from those observed in dogs, at least according to the data available so far. However, many of these cats have also concurrent diseases because, again, they were not well-kept cats, outdoor cats, etc. So I think it remains to be seen. Research is still going on, and we cannot be sure that certain conditions will not be associated with Leishmania infection or the presence of the parasite in the organism of the cat. It might be a predisposing factor to other conditions. So I think it's worth having the available information so far, especially given the fact that leishmaniosis is so widespread in the entire Mediterranean area, and not only according to recent climate changes.
When we created the fact sheets, it was very important for us to not to bring all the information you have about the disease on the fact sheets. Instead, we concentrated on the important parts, for example, in diagnosis and in how you can confirm the diagnosis, because in our opinion, it was very important that we make an extract of that what you have. And this is for practitioners mainly. And so when you have too much information, it's not the best way to concentrate on a disease, for example. So for us, it was very important to create all the fact sheets with an extract of that what we have, and bring it on fact sheets, which is where you have a good overview about the disease, and especially how you can diagnose the disease and how you can treat the disease. And I think in total, the fact sheets are really good, because with one view, you are able to get the most important information about the disease which was shown on the fact sheet. And I think this is a very important point, because you just can recognize a disease when you ever have heard something about the disease. So when you know we can expect Leishmania in northern Germany or in Scandinavia, then you see also cases. When it's not on your list of differential diagnosis, you will oversee them, especially when you have a disease with so untypical clinical symptoms.
And if I may comment just briefly, you know, all these reported signs, they can, for example, take the stomatitis that has been reported for up to 50% of cases. We know that stomatitis or similar conditions are common in cats. So who knows if in a certain percent of these cases, in the high-risk areas, there might be an underlying condition. So this is why we thought that this is not an exotic disease as it was originally regarded, even for vets working in high-risk areas, and it would be worth it to have this information available.
I see here on prevention of feline leishmaniosis. You wrote here that obviously sandfly repellents should be used. Obviously, I mean, they can contain flumestrine, obviously not permethrin. What's your thought about the vaccine that is now available? I mean, it's licensed only for the use in dogs. That in due course it might also be, or is it ready be used off license in cats in Southern Europe? I don't know.
No, I think there is still quite a controversy regarding the canine vaccines. You know, you have fanatic pros and fanatic cons. And I think that even for the canine vaccine, we're still in the period, in my opinion, you have to have clinical data for several years before putting out an opinion that yes, go ahead, this is a good strategy to vaccinate. And for cats, first you have to show up the need to produce a vaccine. And I don't think that the information so far would justify that. That's my opinion.
Feline Haemoplasmosis, is it really a vector-borne disease? Because obviously it's still not quite, or it's somewhat controversial in how far, and I mean, who is the vector also? It's not as clear-cut as I think with the other vector-borne diseases.
Wolfgang, indeed, you're right. This is not the typical way we have it, for example, in Leishmania or in Feline. So there is a difference, but in our opinion, we thought it can be also part of the diseases, because when you see the vector-borne diseases are very often diseases where the parasite will be spread with the blood, and you find very often anemia as a clinical sign. And so this was for us also a reason to put the mycoplasms in the list of the diseases. But when you define it like you defined it, then we can discuss if they are in this list or not. But they are a very important differential diagnosis to other diseases which come from vectors. So in our opinion, it was good to bring them in, but you're right, it's not the same like Leishmania or Feline.
So feline heartworm. Why do you think are cats possibly more resistant than dogs? Any thoughts on that?
Usually, I think the common belief is that they cannot harbor too many parasites. So I'm not sure if they're resistant or if the parasite cycle cannot be completed because they're not the optimum host for the parasite. What I would like to comment on is that again, Feline Heartworm Disease was considered an exotic condition.
Mm.
When the similar disease in dogs emerged in my country, in Greece, more than 20 years ago, in the 90s, it was virtually I haven't been taught in the vet school Dirofilariosis. It was like a Rocky Mountain spotted fever or other exotic diseases. And then within a decade, everything was turned upside down. And since then, it's a very serious problem. And back then, we thought that if we have so many cases in dogs, then you have to have it in cats. But again, it's such a different disease in cats than in dogs. Because of the limitation, because of the cat being a small animal, small-sized animal, and the cats cannot harbor as many parasites. Even one parasite will cause severe disease. This is one thing. And the other is that the clinical signs are very different, and you can have a cat showing off exercise intolerance because we know that cats are cats. They can mimic, Dirofilariosis can mimic so many other conditions, even sudden death, like heart disease, inflicted death can be part of the information. So again, I think that we have cases, especially in Dirofilariosis, endemic areas, and at least in Greece, we have started to see clinical cases diagnosed. So if you follow up cases, and those that died, even that, and you do an autopsy, and then you see that cases are more than originally expected. So again, this is why we thought it would be worth to have this information for this condition.
So with the canine vector-borne diseases fact sheets and the feline fact sheets now done, what are the further sort of plans of the working group?
We will continue the work in the group with another topic, and the new topic is zoonotic diseases. So we are actually on making a list and decided for diseases, and then we will start with collecting the information, but in the end it is something like now. So we will create fact sheets where you have the main informations on or the main informations will be delivered on a very eye-catcher way, so that everybody can see in a very short time what's going on with the disease, where are the main facts. And this is what we do, I think, in the next 2 years. I'm not sure how many time we need for each sheet, because I think we will also have contact to human doctors, because this is something which is something like one health. So I think it should be a combination of vets and human doctors, and so this may make or need more time, but in the end I think 1 to 2 years we need, and then we have between 5 and 10 fact sheets for zoonotic diseases.
Well, if they're just half as popular as the current fact sheets are, then I think you're on a winner. I mean, these fact sheets, the canine and the feline vector-borne disease fact sheets, can be downloaded from the FECAVA website, fecava.org. Zoe, Stephan, thank you very much for this vet chat. If anyone has any questions or comments, please feel free to email us on vetchat@fecava.org. We will read all the emails. We cannot promise that we will reply to all the emails. We are always interested to have suggestions for future vet chats or to try to improve this format. So please feel free to communicate with us on our social media site or via an email. So have a nice evening, and thank you very much again to you two for the vet chat.
Thank you. Stay safe all.
Yes.